I'm going to now segue straight into our next session, which is on the subject of getting the consultation going and getting some expert views. We have aligned a fantastic expert panel. You've heard what's in the document from Mayor Dave and Naomi. You've heard the kind of aspiration that the Heartland has got to really try and transform this whole region. But I suppose what they want to know is from everybody what you think about it, how it can be better, how it can be changed, how it can be enhanced. So what better way of doing that than to start with an expert panel of people who really know what should be in that document. And maybe they've talked to them already, maybe they haven't talked to them enough. Let's hear about that. I'm going to invite my expert panel who's going to really set their case out and really tell you what they think has been missed, what should be emphasised and what they should maybe change. So my expert panel today, Darren Shirley, Chief Executive of the Campaign for Better Transport. Do join us up with Darren. Stephen Joseph, former Chief Executive of the Campaign for Better Transport and now Visiting Professor, Smart Mobility Research Unit Director at the University of Hertfordshire. We are on his patch here. He is, in fact, I think it is actually your lecture theatre, isn't it, Stephen? Yeah. Thank you very much for letting us use it. Christopher Snelling, Head of UK Policy Freight Transport Association. Welcome, Christopher. And finally, Ian Tant, President of the RTPI. And I suppose another chain-wearing colleague of Martin's. And I'm disappointed when Martin came up here and didn't wear his chain, because it's always such a clarity. Do you have a chain? No. Well, do we have the chain? No. You were very welcome without the chain. I will point out right now, we should have had a fifth member, Nick Francis, that Naomi, you mentioned Nick from the National Infrastructure Commission. He sends his huge apologies, and he's got a very good reason. Sadly, and we send our best wishes to him, his partner was knocked off a bicycle this morning. And so he's dealing with that, which is, I believe she's okay, but it does highlight that balance which is being struck continuously between sustainable transport modes and safety on the highways, and maybe we can get stuck into that a bit later on. So apologies that Nick is not with us, but we send his best wishes. So on that note, I'm going to give each of these panelists 5 minutes to make their case. We're going to absorb all that information, go for a cup of tea, and then come back, and we're going to bring up Naomi and Mayor Dave, and we're going to have a panel session to chew it all over with questions from the panel, questions from me, and questions from you. Exactly. So make sure you write down the questions you want to hear the answers to based on what is said. Put them on Slido, and we'll get stuck into those after coffee. So straight away, Darren, Chief Executive of the Campaign for Better Transport. Darren, what's your take on this particular document? Are they going in the right direction? What would you give their advice on? Darren.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you to Mayor Dave, Naomi, and to Martin as well. I'm very pleased to be here today, actually. This is a less intimidating audience than the last event I was speaking at, which was the WI's annual conference with 4,000 people in front of me. I've never been so scared in my life.
The cake was good. The cake was very good.
It was very good, yeah. So, Campaign for Better Transport, we are a charity of 47 years standing. I've got my predecessor, Stephen, here as well, who was Chief Executive for 30 years. I've been in the role for 11 months. Our vision is for all communities to have high-quality, sustainable transport that meet their needs, improves quality of life, and protects the environment. Essentially, we want to make sustainable transport available to all, and we want to encourage its use. So for us, sustainable transport is about providing social and economic connection. It's connecting people to jobs, education, public services, shops, leisure activities, and with other people. It's operating affordably, fairly, and efficiently. It's facilitating choice of transport modes and supporting a competitive economy. And it's limiting greenhouse gas emissions, pollution of the air and water, relying on renewable resources or active travel, and minimises the use of land and the generation of noise. So, to preface my points, this is essentially what the Heartland, through its transport strategy, is trying to achieve. Our vision is being recognised and is being delivered through the outline transport strategy as I've seen it so far. There may be areas of detail that I don't necessarily agree with in terms of parts of what the Heartland wants to achieve through how it wants to achieve that vision. But overall, this strategy, in the way that I see it and the way that I've read it, could lead to a more sustainable transport system for the sub-region. It's forward-looking, forward-thinking, and recognises some of the challenges ahead. I think this is a very positive step, not just for the sub-region, but also for the country. It's recognising the way that we work, shop and travel is changing, and we need to transform, and this will transform how we move between and within our cities, towns and villages. So it's just worth noting actually, this document, as we've heard from all three speakers so far, recognises the need to go to zero carbon, have net zero emissions from transport. This has come before even the government has got to a point where it recognises the need to take action to deliver against its net zero target, which is now in law, written into law in the last couple of weeks. It's set a target, but it doesn't know how it's going to deliver it in transport. The sub-region is far and away ahead of government on this. It's very positive. So it's right the strategy focuses on this, and it's right that it's set a deadline of 2050. It's achievable without being too far into the future. It's not unrealistic. We hear calls for 2025, 2030 to deliver zero carbon from transport. That's next to impossible to achieve. Given the nature of the challenge that's ahead, it would be disruptive and damaging to the economy to do that. To get there, we need to take a measured and planned approach that recognises the scale of the challenge, which is not just about infrastructure, it's about behaviour as well. So I think it's very positive what the Heartland is doing. But for me, there are three interlinked challenges that need to be addressed as the strategy develops over the coming months. So going from a high-level vision to the deliverable plans, the first challenge is about carbon. So I mentioned the need to get to net zero emissions. That is going to be a fundamental challenge. The entire transport system decarbonising is not an easy task. It's going to include delivering charging infrastructure to enable and allow a fast pace of electrification of all road transport as an early priority. It's going to need targeted rail electrification. It's going to need to take the lead on battery and hydrogen power. It's going to need cutting-edge land use planning that incorporates reaching net zero as standard. This is not an easy challenge to meet. The biggest gap that I think requires some consideration is the impact on energy infrastructure. This will need massive amount of work. It is not an easy piece doing what we have to do in transport infrastructure. When you bring the energy infrastructure and the energy system into this as well, it gets a whole lot more challenging, to be quite frank. You need enough power in the areas across the region, the sub-region, to fuel buses, electric delivery vans, e-bikes, HGVs if they can go electric, cars, the metro and the railways. That's a significant draw on power. I don't believe the necessary infrastructure is there on the energy side yet. And you've got to do this all affordably. That's going to require coordination and intervention from government, either local or national, to ensure this is done in a way that spread those costs fairly across the transport system rather than the first mover picking up the cost of the substation, the new cabling, everything else that comes with it. So I think this is one that's going to need a bit of focus in terms of my reflection on the strategy so far. The second challenge is about people. So more housing, more journeys are going to be created. How do we ensure that the environmental impact of the transport network is minimised? How do you ensure you reach that carbon challenge? It's going to require planning. That means large-scale modal shift to active travel and mass transit in urban areas, but also from rural areas. So I disagree with the Minister Michael Ellis's statement at the start that active travel is just about moving around urban areas. It's not. We can connect rural areas, we can connect into urban areas with active travel, with mass transit and more public transport. That's going to again require a significant amount of investment. We need to look at the metroisation of the rail network. How can we bring significant benefits by increasing the frequency of rail services? So we have a metro-style service, not just on the Thames Link coming out of London, but across the region as well. What happens with the interurban public transport offering? That needs to greatly improve. There are real limits, as Naomi showed, with the public transport offering as it is at the moment. I think reducing car use is going to be a significant barrier, and that's not going to be all about infrastructure. That's going to be about behaviour and tackling societal norms. So those rural residents who are dependent on their two cars, that's going to require a change in behaviour, a change in their attitude to how they move around. That is going to be incredibly challenging to get that untapped demand into public transport and using more active forms of travel. And the final challenge, from my perspective, is about businesses. They are going to be integral to the sub-region. A key plank of the approach is to attract more business to the Heartland area. But how do you ensure those businesses will actually want to engage in the transformation to the transport system? How are you going to encourage and incentivise them to have their workers, have their staff use public transport, not their car to drive in? How are you going to do it in a way that brings business with you, That is an incredibly challenging issue to deal with, but I think if the Heartland area gets it right, it will be genuine international leadership. It will be genuine national leadership. We have not seen anything on this scale and on this quality anywhere else in the country. And I've been working across all the major sub-regions, all the major bodies, looking at where the transport system is going in those areas. I haven't seen anything as progressive as what I've seen with the Heartlands work. So I think really should congratulate the potential for the transformational approach that the Heartland could take. And I look forward to seeing how it seizes on this opportunity and demonstrates to the rest of the country what really can be achieved.
Thank you very much, Darren. Thanks very much. Right, moving on, we're going to hear about freight. Christopher Snelling, Head of UK Policy at the Freight Transport Association. What is your view on this document and how do you respond to it? Christopher.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Yes, I am Christopher Snelling from the Transport Freight Association, apparently. That may require some expensive rebranding back at the office. No, at FTA, we represent about 6,000 different companies across the UK, movers of goods in all forms of, all modes, so air, sea, rail, and road, but also importantly, not just the companies moving the goods, but the companies that rely upon them. Britain's producers, manufacturers and retailers, everyone who has something that needs to be moved in order to service the demands of their customers, which ultimately is us, the consuming public. Normally what I do at events like this is come along and say, why on earth haven't you thought about freight? Frustratingly today, I can't do my normal spiel because we have a freight study being published, and I would have to say that I think it is excellent. The most important thing and the biggest frustration we have in dealing with audiences from the national level down is not so much where they come out with policies that we don't agree with. We all understand we have different perspectives and we will disagree about things. But the number of policy documents that we see proceed without any understanding of freight or any effort to understand freight, deeply frustrating to us. So it is really heartening and wonderful to see that EH has put what is clearly a significant effort. The understanding of freight does not come naturally to us, to anyone. We understand that. But they have put the effort in, and I think this is a very good document. It's got the correct identification of the importance of infrastructure, of how freight works, and a really impressive list of potential measures and solutions that need to be taken to improve freight in this region and from this region for the benefit of the UK as a whole. It is particularly encouraging as well to see that focus on the potential upside for the region of freight. It is particularly true in this region where there is the part of the Golden Triangle and so much warehousing. There are direct business opportunities. I think, though, that one thing it doesn't quite perhaps play strongly enough is that it is not just logistics businesses itself that will benefit from good freight. It is everything. The cost of living, the cost of running a city is partly about the cost of doing logistics in that city. The same is true of a county or a region. So anything you can do to increase the efficiency of logistics helps the economic competitiveness, economic growth, and manage the cost of living. Equally, anything you do to increase the cost of logistics has the converse negative effect. I particularly like in the document looking at the solutions and measures, and particularly that they identify those that will have a further specific output. Again, I think this list indicates a really good understanding of where it is a region like this can actually input to the process. So there's a lot of areas that identifies, let's say, the design of vehicles, where from my reading of it, it's correctly picking up that whilst that is a very important issue, it's not one that a region like this or any one region within the UK is actually going to be able to affect. Those things are set at a European and to some extent global level. We have to work with what we get and affect those designs through international bodies as much as we can. But there's a very strong list of areas that the region can engage with, particularly rail enhancements, and I think again it's a very good, clear understanding of a lot of the improvements that need to be done for the port flows that are key in this region to improve rail access and the need for rail freight terminals, the access to roads, lorry parking, alternative fuel support, land for urban logistics, gathering freight data, and particularly logistics planning for logistics training for planners. We do think that's a very important part as in a region like this that's going to grow and develop, integrating from the start logistics into the cities of the future. So looking through the The freight study and also I'd say the outline transport strategy is also a very strong and very good document. There's a couple of bits that jump out as perhaps being the wrong focus. There's several parts about making use of rail freight going into cities or talking about freight on passenger trains. And I think that's an example of looking at a thing that is there and saying, surely we can make use of that. Things like that are not really the best way to do urban logistics. They're not the best use to make of rail freight. Something like rail freight works best with quantity times distance. Those port flows where you've got mass numbers of containers all needing to go from A to B. That's what rail is best at, and probably where we should concentrate our efforts to get the most out of it in the future. There's also some lovely pictures of the high street with the ubiquitous e-cargo bike, and even in this case, a parcel pipe. Which I have to admit I think is where we are straying into the realms of the highly unlikely. So I think it is important to think that nothing is certain about the future, anything could happen, but we have to look at what we think is actually realistic and what is actually, things like drones, parcel pipes might exist. Are they actually going to be any real part of solving the problems we face? We don't think so. So they're not really that relevant for a public policy discussion. I think I'd finish off with just a series of thoughts about where we think we stand in relation to regional transport and freight. I think one is that we are optimistic that technology can solve a lot of the problems that we face, particularly emissions and road safety. We can make massive progress on those in the next 10 years, and some of the elements necessary for that have been identified in the freight study. But fundamentally, particularly for our towns and cities, the same quantum of freight is going to need to move into them, and there is no magic solution to congestion. Mode shift will play a very important role and is necessary on the trunk roads, but as I've said, is not ideally suited to urban deliveries. Retiming will be an important part of this, and that's something for us to work with local councils about making sure that we have access to nighttime deliveries, particularly as the units themselves become quieter and quieter. But fundamentally, if you've got the same quantum of goods going in, the most efficient way to do logistics for everyone's benefit is in the fewest number of transport units possible. So what our strongest message to local authorities is to avoid the trap of unnecessary restrictions on the size of vehicles inside cities. There is an almost emotional belief that big is bad, but if you have the same quantum of freight, a medium-sized truck can do the job of 10 vans, one van can do the job of 10 e-cargo bikes. E-cargo bikes are brilliant for what they are good at, but again, it's likely to remain a pretty small niche rather than being a part of the solution. The fact is, though, that the fundamental point we would like to also want to make is that freight and its use of the transport, we have a transport network, and passenger and freight will completely interact for the future, and we need a system that is efficient. And it may be that as we look towards the longer term, facing these problems of road use, to which there aren't easy solutions, we may need to move towards some form of rationing or possibly road charging on our trunk roads and in our towns and cities in order to drive efficiency within the transport system. Because it is hard to see for us how we can deliver a truly efficient transport network without some form of accounting for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christopher. Right, moving rapidly on. Ian Tant, from the Rural Town Planning Institute, the Rural Town Planning Institute, apologies, yep. President Ian Tant, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you for welcoming me here. A planner at a transport conference, who'd have thought it? When I started my planning career, actually here in Hertfordshire, 40 years ago this month, the planners went to transport conferences only so they could get their continuing professional development points and actually try and understand what the highways colleagues were trying to tell them whenever they got advice from them. What I've learnt through my career is the vital importance of not just planners and transport planners working close together, but actually so many of the professions in the built environment and construction industries working together, because individually we can make great plans. Individually we can produce interesting visions, but if we want to deliver, we can only deliver by working together. And that therefore means that there is a vital importance to joining the role of planning, strategic planning, and transport infrastructure planning and investment, so that they work as one. And it's that integrated and joined up planning which is a key theme that the Royal Town Planning Institute, I'll keep it short, the RTPI, it's easier that way, the RTPI has been working on and campaigning for some time. What we're clear about is that planning and transport working together are critical to the delivery of good homes, well-designed places, of jobs, economic prosperity, and to protecting the environment. A number of people before me have already referred to the zero carbon challenge. Climate change, climate action is something which we all vitally need to engage and embrace in our work. And only by working in an integrated manner can we actually tackle a number of those issues. Technology will help, but it's joint work, joint thought, joint effort that will bring the delivery of zero carbon or net zero carbon about. It's vitally important that we maintain those links together. The RTPI, in fact, started looking at policy work on infrastructure some time ago. In 2014, we produced a report entitled Transport Infrastructure Investment, Capturing the Wider Benefits of Investment in Transport Infrastructure. And the report identified that the lack of joined-up thinking about how infrastructure provision can tackle problems in other sectors means that project costs and rationale often seem unpalatable if you view them in isolation. But in reality, they may have potential to deliver far-reaching and hugely valuable benefits. The Transport Infrastructure Report also identified that governments need to operate in a way that enables transport infrastructure schemes to be integrated with wider policy initiatives across different sectors. And that's something which in my work, both as a planning consultant for 30 years, and since I stepped down from my consultancy in 2016, I've been working with local enterprise partnerships and others, trying to ensure that we really recognize that when you're investing in transport infrastructure, it has a huge benefit in delivering homes, in delivering jobs, homes, services, transport infrastructure all go together. Underlying all of this work is a belief in the need for a sustainable, integrated approach to planning and transport. I believe that ethos is shared here at the University of Hertfordshire. Skills and generating the people with the right skills is an essential component of what we have to deliver here in the heartland and across the nation as a whole. And that's why I'm delighted to announce that the University of Hertfordshire has gained RTPI accreditation for its postgraduate sustainable planning programs, including specialist teaching that integrates planning and transport. It's truly a time of growth for planning here at the university, with the commitment to appoint a professor of planning in the coming months. My hope is that the University of Hertfordshire, as our 33rd planning school, joins our work to lead the way in developing skills, developing capacity, and spearheading innovation to help deliver infrastructure in the right place, to protect the environment, and to unlock development potential. The Heartlands transport strategy, the outline strategy, with its focus on strategic vision and on delivery, is an excellent starting point. But the next steps and the challenge are to ensure that joined-up planning leads, of course, to joined-up investment and joined-up delivery on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. And finally, Stephen Joseph, Visiting Professor at Smart Mobility Research Unit Director at the University of Hertfordshire here. Stephen, round us off.
Thank you very much, Anthony. And I think it falls to me as the representative of the university to welcome you to this university and to this auditorium, and I hope you find the facilities here and enjoy looking around the university itself. I'm, as you've gathered, a visiting professor here, and what I want to say in the next few minutes is how the university and the Smart Mobility Research Unit in particular will be able to support the Heartland in delivering the vision that's set out in its transport strategy. The university has a tradition of turning out students with an interest in and skills in placemaking, and you've just heard Ian announce accreditation from the RTPI for its planning course. And it's working to develop transport courses at master's, postdoctorate and potentially undergraduate level as well. But the university also has a track record and transport in practice. It has its own bus company, UNO. It has smart ticketing on the bus company and a park and ride service. It has, I think, the university's oldest university e-car club with more than 200 members, and other initiatives including rigorously managed on-site parking. And it's now established the Smart Mobility Research Unit, which is a multidisciplinary unit jointly sponsored by the Life and Medical Sciences and Engineering schools, and with a wide range of expertise, including in behavioural psychology and GIS and data analysis. And this fits into and is part of the university's own industrial strategy, which responds to the government's industrial strategy and its 5 challenges, of which the future of mobility is one. The university and the unit believes it can help the Heartland and its members with research and pilot projects to tackle the transport problems they face and support the strategy launched today. There's a lot of research and work on mobilities in cities, and the focus of most transport research at the moment is on large cities and also in historic towns like Oxford and Cambridge. There's much less work around on what smart and sustainable mobility might look like in an area like Hertfordshire and the other counties around the Heartland. Small towns, villages, in the case of Hertfordshire and others, part of the London commuter area, but still with sizable local employment, and also reasonably well off, though, with areas of severe deprivation. Hertfordshire and the Heartland are also, as you've heard, an area with a large amount of planned housing development. And Hertfordshire shares these characteristics and factors with much of the rest of the Heartland. So we're now planning to run a set of policy roundtables this autumn on the future of mobility for counties, to consider what smart and sustainable mobility for areas like Hertfordshire and counties like it can be in practice. These roundtables will draw participants from Hertfordshire and the Heartland, and also nationally, and from academics and groups like, hopefully, the Campaign for Better Transport, the professional institutions, and others. The themes of the roundtables will include smart mobility, including bringing together the data that's around and using it, better public and shared transport, new forms of governance, funding and finance, integrating transport with planning and housing, a key theme, as Ian's just reminded us, ways of doing consultation and public engagement on transport, and promoting active travel, and rounding these off with a session on climate change and good growth, how the transport action in areas like Hertfordshire and places like it can contribute to and measure up to the challenge of meeting the Paris challenge of keeping global temperature rise under 1.5 degrees. The ideas in the roundtables will generate a research agenda and also research projects, but as importantly, I hope practical projects and pilots on projects, issues such as demand-responsive transport and sustainable travel towns, which is a key feature of Hertfordshire's latest local transport plan, and also, and generally, pilots for smart and sustainable transport and placemaking. The university sees its role as supporting the Heartland and its members in the way forward. And the initiative I've announced has already been supported by the Heartland, by Gascoigne and Cecil Estates, And it's also developing close links with these and others, including, of course, the County Council, the Connected Places Catapult, which is, of course, partly based in Milton Keynes, and local companies like Ocado and BT, which is already developing with the County Council and support from the university a living lab on the business park on which was sitting. So we look forward to working with the Heartland and others in this room to take these ideas forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Right. There we have 4 expert views on what the transport strategy, the outline transport strategy is really tackling. I'm going to leave you with those thoughts. And it's good also to see, thank you very much to our 4 panelists. We're going to bring you back after the coffee break to start putting some of those points directly to Mayor Dave and Naomi. And I also want to get some of the points that you've raised on Slido and some questions directly from the audience. There's some good points being made on Slido already, covering things such as low carbon travel, the support for bicycle travel, etc. Also impact of roads on the 2050 target, points that are made across the floor here already. The need to embrace the use of new freight modes for the final kilometre. Interesting, maybe we'll get stuck into that, Christopher, about the use of drones and on how you see that going forward. The Oxford-Cambridge Expressway, where that's going, we're going to get into that. And of course, new travel modes for the young. There are some young here. Some people have made some points about new travel modes for the young, although the point that's made on Slido is that apparently young is under 30. Which may be good to hear for a lot of people here. Anyway, finally, there's also some points, and be very afraid, about the impact of Brexit. And on that note, I'm going to let you go and have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee out there in the concourse area. Do speak to our sponsors and have a chat. But thanks very much to our panel. A round of applause.